Major League Baseball trade deadline just about a week away, a week from Thursday. Welcome in, everybody. Chatterbox Reds. Rumors are swirling. Welcome in. I'm Craig Sandlin, joined by Nick Kirby. Nick, rumors this evening swirling that the Reds and Diamondbacks have mutual interest in finding a deal for Eugenio Suarez. Your initial reactions to a Reds and Geno Suarez reunion.
Really pulling at the heartstrings here, huh? I mean, I think anyone who didn't love Eugenio Suarez is a piss poor Reds fan, in my opinion. One of the greatest of all time, and just an awesome dude. Man, I loved the idea of Suarez. He was one of the guys I said all off season. I love the idea of Suarez earlier in the year, back when he was, batting 220, back when he was on pace for 30 home runs. I didn't really expect, 150 WRC plus on pace for over 50 home runs, Eugenio Suarez. It just seems like he's going to be priced out from the Reds. It just seems like the Reds, where they're at, it doesn't make sense. But I'll tell you a path that I could squint and make sense at.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Eugenio Suarez now on the season hitting 252 for the Diamondbacks, 36 home runs, sits tied for third in Major League Baseball, along with 86 RBIs. I said it on the post-game show a couple days ago, but my opinion still rings true that as much as I think you, and many other Reds fans would love to see a Eugenio Suarez reunion, feels at this point that it's probably more expensive than a deal that the Reds would typically make, especially for a rental, especially in a year where, at least in my opinion, the Reds aren't a piece away from being World Series contenders. Geno gets them considerably closer to being a playoff contender. But the question becomes, what is your goal at this trade deadline? Are you looking to set yourself up for a World Series run in 26 or 27, or are you looking to make the playoffs in 25? Those are the answers that Nick Krall has to answer. But if you're sitting in his seat, what is your goal for this trade deadline, Nick? Are you trying to set yourself up for a playoff run this year, or are you trying to set yourself up long term? Because Geno, with an expiring contract, doesn't really do anything for you beyond this year unless you can extend it.
Well, there's a lot that can still happen between now and the trade deadline and the days before the trade deadline. So let me give you the path that I can squint and be okay with this type of deal. Reds sweep the Tampa Bay Rays this weekend. The Padres lose 3 of 4 to the Cardinals. That would put the Reds most likely tied for a playoff spot. I can maybe get on board with a Eugenio Suarez rental if it's going to cost me, maybe someone in the 10 to 15 prospect range. Still a lot. I can maybe get on board with that. But if you're doing that, it has to be a series of moves. It can't just be only getting a Eugenio Suarez. That's about the only path that it makes sense for me. I've seen a lot of other takes that, well, you would get Suarez and you would get him and you would try to extend him. Why not just try to sign him in the offseason then when he's free? He is going to get traded at the trade deadline, so he's not going to have a qualifying offer attached to him. So he's going to be essentially free in 2 months. I can totally get on board with the idea of Eugenio Suarez as a free agent, especially if, at 34 years old, you can convince him maybe just 2 or 3 years. It's not something super long term. I can fully get on board with taking a shot at Eugenio Suarez in free agency. But giving up a valuable prospect when my playoff odds are going to be down in the 10 to 15% range, that's where I kind of have a difficult time making sense of this. It to me, to be completely frank with you, Craig, would feel more like a PR move than a winning move.
Yeah, look, I think given the amount of teams that have been reportedly interested, you've got teams like the Yankees, the Mariners, the Cubs, the Brewers, who have all shown interest in bringing Geno Suarez in for their playoff run here in 2025. I find it hard to believe that the Reds are going to be willing to put together a package that makes sense for the Diamondbacks to send Geno back to Cincinnati. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't see a reunion this offseason like you're talking about, But for me, I think that the other teams that are interested in Gino, and quite frankly, Gino's played himself into one of, if not the top trade targets in all of baseball now. I find it really hard to believe that the Reds are going to be on the forefront of those negotiations and put together a package that makes sense. Just a couple of days after Nick Krall and Brad Meter talked about how they weren't interested in moving top prospects. So to your point, yeah, if the Diamondbacks are willing to take a package of a couple prospects in that 15 to 20 range, maybe it makes sense. But I just don't see that being the case given some of the reports out there of all the other teams that are interested. Now, Nick, the other thing that obviously is in play here is that the Diamondbacks are very clearly selling. There is no question about it. Their season has not gone how they want, and they have a number of players on expiring contracts, players like Eugenio Suarez, but also Josh Naylor, Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, amongst others. Is there a world where you could see yourself giving up maybe a higher end prospects in a package deal where you're getting more than just Gino back from the Diamondbacks?
Maybe it's those deals don't happen all that often. How many times do you see a team trading multiple big leaguers to another team? Now it's possible. Like I think like Lance Lynn was packaged with Joe Kelly. That's one that comes to mind. There's been a few, but these are, I think, higher players than that. Seeing two like fringe all-star players getting packaged together or two bona fide like above average players, you just don't see that all that often because these teams want these guys separate because that'll typically bring them the most return. So if it's there, yeah, sure, I'm all for it. If it's but I have a hard time seeing that. I think Josh Naylor could make a lot of sense. I think that he's going to cost a lot less than Eugenio Suarez. He's owed a little bit less money, which I don't actually view as a good thing. I'd rather have a guy that costs more because I know that you typically cost less in prospects back. But he's making $11 million almost on the year. So what is that? $3 million or so that you pay for him after the trade deadline. I mean, he has a 124 WRC plus. Probably hasn't played his best baseball of the year. So he might have maybe even the potential for more upside. Guy that hit 31 home runs last year. He's a guy, though, that if you did play really well this weekend, maybe you inch closer, you get to maybe a game and a half, 2 games back. You could get the Diamondbacks to maybe just, take a Carlos Jorge. That might be a name that would maybe I could maybe get on board with that as a rental where you're giving up a player that, yeah, I like Carlos Jorge, but I think Carlos Jorge being a big league contributor is probably a long shot, and I think I could be okay with parting with that. But if we're talking, like I saw the mention of Cam Collier for Eugenio Suarez, I would have a hard time ever getting on board with that. That's just not the kind of thing that I think makes sense for the Reds.
No, and you just moved Noelvi Marte, or at least are giving Noelvi Marte reps in the outfield, which to me already is a little bit questionable unless you think Cam Collier is that close to being ready, or maybe Sal Stewart is that close to being ready. Maybe that's the better comment. But yeah, look, I think ultimately the Reds are in an interesting position because they do have the opportunity to try and fight for a playoff spot this year. And with the starting pitching that they have, once you get there, anything can happen. But at the same time, Nick Krall and Brad Meter have not shown a propensity to be willing to sell the future for today. So it'll be really interesting to see how this trade deadline goes down. Eugenio Suarez over the last calendar year, top 10 player in baseball in terms of WAR, 6.3 wins above replacement for Gino Suarez over the last calendar year. So certainly has earned this. And if you ask Gino, it certainly seems like he knows that the writing is on the wall tonight after the Diamondbacks game. Spent some extra time along the railing in the dugout, just taking it all in what is assumedly his last game as a Diamondback in Chase Field as the Diamondbacks go on the road for the next week. So likely done in Arizona is Gino Suarez. Nick, look, I think at this point, anything could happen, but the likelihood of it happening is slim in my eyes. Final question, I guess, for you at this point, Nick, is what percentage of likelihood would you put on Eugenio Suarez in a Reds reunion?
I think I'd put it higher that they signed him in the offseason than acquired him at the trade deadline. Take that for what you will. So I would probably put it like below 5%. Again, I think the Reds would have to have an absolutely insane couple days where they get hot. Teams around them falter and they gain a couple games. And then maybe the Reds are kind of there hanging around in the Suarez sweepstakes, kind of seeing if maybe the Yankees panic. I saw a report that they were looking at Ryan McMahon of the Rockies. The Yankees are kind of, hey, we can't wait around. We're the New York Yankees. If Brian Cash's like, if I don't go get a third baseman, they're going to come at pitchforks. I'm just going to go and take Ryan McMahon because I know I can get him now. And then the Diamondbacks have to go to plan B, and that's where maybe the Reds would fit in. That's probably about the only way I see this kind of deal happening. But let's go ahead and start the conversation, though, Craig. I would be all for a short-term contract in the offseason. I think he would be absolutely the kind of player, a veteran player, a player that's probably not looking or expecting more than a couple years. And yes, the Reds have failed on these kind of contracts, but I don't think they should be scared to take swings for short-term players that could obviously have the impact like Eugenio Suarez could have. So I'm a lot more on board with looking at him in the offseason. And it's great that he's not going to be on the Diamondbacks because that means he doesn't have a qualifying offer. If he'd stay on the Diamondbacks all year, you'd have to be giving up a qualifying offer pick for him, which is what Sal Stewart is right now, the highest rising prospect in the Reds minor league system right now.
Yeah. Well, of course, if any additional news breaks, Nick, myself, Trace, and the entire Chatterbox Reds crew will have you covered right here on Chatterbox Sports. And if you want to meet your favorite personality from Chatterbox Reds, minus me, sorry, I won't be there, make sure you join us live on Tuesday, July 29th from Smoke Justice in Covington for the first ever Chatterbox Reds live show taking place Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. The guys will be there talking Reds baseball, doing a live show. Make sure you come out, get some of the best smoke meats and bourbon around. Plus, first 50 attendees in attendance get a free Chatterbox t-shirt. So Nick, I know, looks forward to meeting many of you. He will be there Tuesday, July 29th. And who knows, maybe Eugenio Suarez will be a Red by then. Only time will tell. Until next time, for Nick Kirby, I'm Craig Sandlin. This has been Chatterbox Sports.